There's been documentaries and things that we see on TV of people passed out in their cars, passed out on the side of the road, passed out in a supermarket. And I think the important thing to remember is that addiction doesn't know skin color, it doesn't know socioeconomic status, it doesn't know who you are, what you do, or what your environment is.
So for my younger teenage years, it was kind of just about whatever I could get my hands on, primarily marijuana, pills, and alcohol. And when I was about 17 is when this kind of 4-year period of my life takes off. Alcohol and drugs just become my primary focus, my primary purpose, and kind of everything that my life revolves around. And at that point is when I'm introduced to cocaine, which in turn introduces me to crack cocaine, which in turn introduces me to heroin, which in turn introduces me to a whole different lifestyle, one of homelessness and incarceration and, sex work, and really brings me to a very dark, very hopeless, very desperate place.
It was about 10 days after my 13th birthday. I had already stolen a couple of pills. I was already sort of seeking that way out. I had a boyfriend who was older. He offered heroin, and there wasn't really a decision-making process for me. I just wanted out of my feelings. I didn't start with pills. I started with heroin. Heroin was my drug of choice.
My use began when I was 14 years old. It just progressed until the age of 26 when I finally got clean.
Growing up, I didn't use or abuse drugs or alcohol, but after my first child was born, I was prescribed Percocet for my C-section. After I had a lot of postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety issues, I felt like the opioids and the benzodiazepines that I was prescribed were helping me emotionally as well as physically.
In the military, everybody drank. That was our way of letting go of any stress from the day. But when I got home from the military at 24, I started hanging with people that looked like they were having fun to me. So I wanted to join in on the fun. I never felt like I was good with people. I mean, now I know it's not true, but then I thought that I wasn't good with people. So to fit in, they were using drugs. It looked like they were having a ball to me. That's what it appeared. That's the setup. It looked like it was fun.
Doctors also put me on, due to my anxiety and depression, had put me on Adderall, Xanax. Once I found out I could abuse those, I did so. I was snorting Adderall probably my junior year. I also figured out I could snort the Xanax too and get a greater effect. And I started doing that also.
At the height of my addiction, I was seeing about 6 doctors at a time. I would see one every month, and then I would come back around. So it didn't look like I was using my prescription.
Everything that I do and everything that I am is surrounded around alcohol and drugs, and how am I going to get it, and where am I going to do it, and who am I going to do it with, and what do I have to do to get it. Just this very painful, dark, vicious cycle completely surrounded around alcohol and drugs.
I always worked, but none of my money went towards paying any bills. It went towards maintaining my addiction. So I worried my family a lot for money. I was always asking somebody for money. I could work 2 jobs and it still wouldn't be enough to maintain my addiction.
Every day I took a combination of whatever pills I had, whatever pills I had found or had been prescribed to me. I took opioids like Percocet or Vicodin, and I took benzodiazepines like Ativan or Xanax. I felt like I was in control of the addiction. I was going to the doctor's appointments, sometimes even 2 in 1 week, 2 in 1 day. I was making those things happen. I was going through my friends' medicines cabinets, and I felt like the addiction hadn't gotten out of control because I was still managing it.
I really played into the pity party with my doctors. It was, well, I have this and now this, and I just feel horrible. My energy's so low, and my pain is through the roof, and these medications you have me on, and I used it.
My belief is that there really is no rock bottom. The true definition of rock bottom is dying, because you can always go deeper. Even when I thought that the consequences and my lifestyle had gotten as bad as they could possibly ever get, it could always have gotten worse. There are hundreds of different types of rock bottoms, and that what I might consider a rock bottom might be very different than what you might consider a rock bottom.
Things had gotten serious when my friend's father died, and I raided his medicine cabinet. I felt terrible because she was crying on the couch, and I was most concerned about where I could find pill bottles in his house. The pills I was taking weren't strong enough, and there weren't enough of them. So I realized that if I was going to continue being an addict, I needed to find a dealer, and I needed to find harder drugs. And that really scared me.
My rock bottom, I remember being 2 weeks into treatment. I had a drug dealer. When I went in, I had owed him some money, and basically I was supposed to pay him back for a prescription I was getting. Next thing you know, I have a drug dealer threatening my daughter. That was not all right.
I hid this addiction that I'd had on and off for 10 years from pretty much everyone in my life. When I was 23, my fiance at the time caught me in the act of using. And that's what prompted me to tell my parents, and they immediately got me into rehab. They were shocked, to say the least. They felt guilty, they felt confused. How could they have not noticed this or seen this? You can always go back as a parent, I'm sure, and look back and oh, I should have seen this or noticed that. But at the end of the day, I was very good at hiding it.
I'd been arrested a handful of times for all clearly charges related to my addiction: petty larceny, prostitution, drug possession. This arrest was a charge that's called interference with a railroad. And so what that translates to was that I was freight train hopping, which is a felony and also very, very dangerous. But that was the charge that landed me actually to be incarcerated for a period of time. And it wasn't until, for me, I was in jail that I was removed for a long enough period of time through physical detoxification and some sort of defogging of the brain, where I was able to begin to have some clarity about the need and the necessity, and also some desire for recovery.
I kept saying, if I don't do something soon, I'm gonna be homeless. So we downtown, and I see a lady pushing a shopping cart, and I saw me. Terrified me, because I know that I wouldn't be able to make it out there living on the street. Fear was my great motivator.
You're not chasing a high, you're looking to sort of sink beneath all of the things that you're trying to avoid, whether it's depression, whether it's other mental health issues, whether it's some sort of childhood trauma, or just the shame, the inherent shame in being a drug addict. You get caught in sort of this shame loop or shame cycle, and there's a desire to escape it by just sort of sinking underneath all of it. It was about looking to get low.
Shame and guilt is a miserable thing, and it grabs onto you like a cloak. I mean, you wake up with it, you go to sleep with it, except when you're high, because your mind is numb. Pain was my motivating factor for using after a while. I just didn't want to go through the withdrawal. Pain woke me up in the morning to say, get better, and it drives you throughout the day, because my biggest fear was being sick.
For me, I think it comes from the idea of self-medication for a mental health condition. From a young age, feeling separate, apart from, not good enough, just uncomfortable, and finding alcohol first, and then other drugs, pain pills, or any prescription medication, and marijuana to kind of take that away, to disassociate, to numb myself a little bit, and to just feel better about myself through the use of those substances.
I knew how to keep a smile on my face, but inside I was just a hurricane. You know, I was a mess.
When I was about 8 years old, it was the first time that I stole a pill. I found an expired bottle of Darvocet that I think had been my grandmother's after a surgery. It had a label on it that said may cause drowsiness, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be drowsy. I wanted to be asleep. I wanted to not feel what I felt.
Even though I was clearly physically and mentally addicted to drugs, I kind of had this idea that it was like a middle-aged man with a trench coat under a bridge with a bottle, maybe clothes underneath the trench coat, maybe not. And because I didn't fit that stereotype, I didn't know that I could seek help, or that I needed help, or that there was a way out.
When I was in rehab, I was the only heroin addict. And the thing that I heard time and time again from other addicts was it was the one drug they would never touch. There's no moral high ground from one substance to the next. Just because somebody's addicted to pills that a doctor gave them, it doesn't absolve them of the stranglehold that addiction has on you. Drug addiction looks like me, it looks like you, it looks like the person standing next to you.
As a stay-at-home mom, I was still taking care of my kids. I took them to the playground, we went on play dates, I made dinner almost every night. There are a lot of ways I justified having an addiction, and one of them was, if other moms can drink a glass or two of wine, I can certainly take a pill or two. And I was doing all the things I needed to be doing, and it looked like I was doing all the things I needed to be doing.
I worked every day. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't, selling my body. And yet the disease brings you down physically, so you could put the finest clothes on and you still look like an addict. And my mannerisms began to change, and I started to change. The disease was just breaking me in pieces so gradually that I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it.
Do I look like a heroin addict? What exactly does a heroin addict look like, right? You can't say. Nobody knows. Because it's not that person sitting on the side of the street. It's your next door neighbor. It's, for teachers, it's your student sitting in your classroom, right? That might come off a little distracted. It's everyone. And that's what people really need to understand. The stigma is what kills people. It really, really is.
In a lot of the urban areas, opioids have been prevalent for a long time. So when they talk about it like it's new, I'm wondering where they've been, because it's nothing new about the opioid addiction. We waited so long, and now it's a big mess when we could have caught it when it was just a mess. Now it's a gigantic mess.
The outward picture of who is affected by addiction has become white, middle-class, young people, which has caused there to be some buy-in from society at large, which is unfortunate because people's worth and value should not be based on their socioeconomic status, the color of their skin, their religion.
Sometimes it's hard to have a lot of faith in the government to do the smart thing, but that's what's needed right now, despite anybody's color, anything. Let's just take care of the problem, and it can be dealt with. It's going to take a lot of work. We are going to have to fight a good fight on this one. It's going to take all of us.